Michael Mezmer here again. Yeah, so I'm doing a grad night up here in Nevada County this night. And so because of that, I've decided to stay at the Northern Queen, where they have this very old railroad. It's fascinating, actually, and it connects to a lot of interesting places around here. So let's take a walk and check out everything on the railroad. So here's the rail bus station for the Northern Queen. Again, this is in Nevada City, and very interesting here because the train's not running anymore at this time. But you used to go up and walk around there, around the area, and then you would come through this gate and you get up on this area here where you'd board the train, and then you'd head off into the big trees here in the Northern Queen property. But it went way back into a lot of interesting areas. You can see now they're still advertising the Railroad Museum, which is still up in the forest area. You can drive around to it, and I believe it's still open, but the train, as I mentioned, is no longer running at this time. So we'll see if it ever gets running again. So we're heading up the tracks of the very old train ride, I would call it, but on the other hand, it really was a train route from here to Colfax, up here near Nevada City and Grass Valley and Nevada County. So it was a working railroad at one time, but so it's not really a ride, although it became that ultimately. And now this track actually leads up to a railroad museum up the way. I don't know how it's connected or if it is connected or any of that, but and then of course the Chinese cemetery at the campsite is also part of this route here. So a very interesting place to visit. And now that the train is not running, they allow you to walk back here and check out how it used to be, how it looked. And as you can see, it's quite an area. Beautiful trees and interesting old mining equipment along the way here. Here's a closer look at the mining equipment that still sits here. And it's right over the water. And of course they use the water with the mining equipment. And you can see how old and rusty it is, but still quite interesting to see the old mining equipment right near the railroad. Right. So we're approaching one of the railroad crossings here. They used to have a big area out here for private parties and picnics. And so it's kind of interesting. It's pretty much grown over now. Not what it used to look like at all. But over here are some very interesting train cars. We're going to get over there and show you a little video about them. These train cars were used not only here, but the way they picked them up was they bought them from movie companies. And so some of these were used in movies, and we'll tell you about one in specific. The railroad cars behind me are somewhat infamous. They were used in the filming of the movie The Twilight Zone, the movie. And John Lithgow was in that movie, but more importantly, Vic Morrow was in that movie from Combat. You may remember that TV series. In any case, these trains were used for the plot of the movie. In that movie, Vic Morrow was playing a character that was racist. And so he had to go through different parts of time to understand how other people felt and how racism worked. And so infamously, he was killed at the end of the filming of the Twilight Zone film when a helicopter came down and literally slit his head off. It was pretty drastic. 2 children were killed in that accident as well. As very famous actor, director John Landis was taken to court over it. But these particular cars were used when he was in the section where he was going to be taken off to a Jewish internment camp in Germany. And so he was going to learn how it felt to be a Jew during Nazi Germany. So that's really the interesting point about these cars. I happen to know this because in the old days when I took rides here with my family and my son Wesley, they explained about how they acquired these cars from Hollywood and how they had them here and what they were used for. I notice now that they have chicken wire around these cars. I don't know if it's to hold them together. Probably is. Or perhaps just keep people out of them so that no one gets hurt, because people do come back here from the campground where the Chinese cemetery is located. But yes, Vic Morrow was right in that area as they had him carted off to a German internment camp. Corporate parties were done here in this central area as well as weddings. It's very overgrown now and very different, but they would get off, they would have their wedding or whatever event, then they would come through this bridge. As they went through the bridge, there'd be another boarding area for the train. It's a pretty old bridge, pretty fascinating looking. And There was a beautiful brook that ran through here as well. It still does. And then they would come up here and they would board the train once again. And then they'd head up the hill there to head to the Chinese cemetery. There were mines all throughout this area, all under Nevada City, under Grass Valley, all in the Grass Valley area and the Nevada County area. And this is one of them. It was the Mohawk Mine. And actually this one runs under the campsite and the Chinese cemetery. So it's a pretty strange and interesting area up here. There were so many beautiful areas when the train was running. But as you can see now, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of it's highly overgrown, but still pretty in its own way. It's kind of sad that this has all been abandoned now. It was so vibrant when we rode the train in the old days. So here's one of the locomotives that we used to ride. I would come here in the days when it was open. And as you can see, it's quite a fantastic locomotive. Hopefully someday it's going to ride again. Back in the day, this train went from here all the way to Colfax over the mountain. It was used to transfer everything from the mines. It was built by the Chinese people, and you have to think about how it must have been for them being perhaps shanghaied, and that term really is a term, shanghaied and brought here to the States and then put on labor camps and put out here to make these train tracks. It made a lot of money for a lot of rich people. Unfortunately, the Chinese, of course, never benefited from it. Very sad in a way. We talk a lot about other ethnic groups, but the Chinese sure put a lot of work into these train tracks, not just here, but all the way across the United States. So we have to be grateful for them for building the infrastructure that made our country work, and a little bit sad that they never got what they deserved for the incredible work they did on these train tracks all over the U.S. I did want to mention that I have an affinity for railroads for a couple of reasons. My uncle, who was married to my dad's sister, was actually an engineer for most of his life on the trains. And he used to bring me souvenirs. He'd bring me spikes from the train, the spikes that they put down to actually lay the track, like that one right there. And so I had that, and I've kept it forever because it was always sort of magical to me to see how, in fact, they built the train railings and how the trains would move. Also, another interesting story, during the Depression, my dad took on a lot of jobs. He even helped build some of the roads up in Yellowstone. But he also was a bum on the trains for a while. He became successful later in life. He did a great job with what he did, which he was one of the top Chevy salesmen in the United States for many, many years west of the Mississippi. But for a time in our country, when everyone was broke, it was one of those things where everybody did whatever they could to survive, and my dad rode the rails. I hope you've enjoyed this video tour of the old railroad here in the Northern Queen Hotel, Nevada City, Nevada County, California. I know I have. It's interesting to take a walk back in time and see how things were a decade ago. Hopefully someday the old railroad will run again. But if not, it's still great to be able to walk around and see all the remnants of the wonderful tour they once had here. Have a great day. I'm Michael Mezmer.